the summer of 2026. A drone lifts off a patch of private ground in Taylor County, Texas, and climbs into a wide, empty sky. Below it sits one of the largest artificial intelligence data centers in the world. 4 million square feet of buildings going up across 1,100 acres, a footprint bigger than Central Park. From the road, you cannot see into it. You can circle the property for an hour and learn nothing at all. In ordinary daylight, the drone's camera shows a gray building in a field, enormous and completely still. Then the operator switches the camera to thermal, and the picture changes. Off one exhaust stack, heat is pouring out in a plume so bright it seems to overflow the frame. There is nothing there to see with your eyes, nothing at all. But that machine is running, and it is running hard. Here's the part almost nobody outside the fence knows. On the day that footage is captured, exactly one of the 10 turbines installed on that site is switched on. One, and the plan already filed calls for more than 50. The story of America's data center boom was never really about the computers. It is about the private power plants being built to feed them in people's backyards out of sight, and about what they are putting into the air that you cannot see. To understand what is happening on that patch of West Texas ground, you have to go back a couple of years to the moment the artificial intelligence industry realized what it was actually short of. It was not short of ideas, it was not short of engineers, and it was very much not short of money. By the year 2030, companies are projected to have poured close to $7 trillion into data center infrastructure. In 2026 alone, the largest technology companies are expected to spend more than $800 billion building the machinery behind artificial intelligence. In 2027, that number is projected to pass $1 trillion. That is roughly what the United States spends on its entire military in a year. What the industry was short of was electricity. Every question typed into a chatbot travels to a building full of processing chips, and those chips are extraordinarily hungry. Demand was not creeping upward. In a single year, the global number of people using chatbots went from about 400 million to about 900 million. More than double. And in this business, being second does not pay. The companies building these facilities are not competing on elegance. They are competing on speed. And speed means getting as much power as fast as humanly possible. Here was the problem. In most of the country, if you want to plug a facility of this size into the public electrical grid, you get in line. That line is measured in years. For a company that believes the artificial intelligence market will be decided inside the next 36 months, a 5-year wait is not an inconvenience. It is a death sentence. So they stopped waiting. And the thing they did instead is the reason people in Texas and Mississippi are now living beside industrial power plants that nobody in their neighborhood ever approved. The solution the industry landed on has a plain name. Bring your own power plant. Instead of waiting for the grid, you build your own generation on site, behind the meter, feeding one customer and one customer only. 2 years ago, that was an oddity. Today, it is the standard playbook. Now, when these projects are announced, there's almost always a paragraph about renewable energy, solar commitments, wind, long-term nuclear partnerships. And those announcements are sincere in the sense that somebody probably intends to honor them eventually. But look at what is actually going into the ground right now, and the picture changes. Analysts tracking the build-out place meaningful renewable power for artificial intelligence at 2028 at the earliest. New nuclear plants are a decade away, possibly more. Neither of those can be ordered this quarter. Natural gas turbines can. They can be manufactured, shipped by truck, bolted down, and switched on. So that is what is being built. In Texas, the scale of it is difficult to hold in your head. There are roughly 300 data centers in the state already. At least 100 more are under construction, and about another 100 are planned on top of that. Texas currently has something in the range of 80 gigawatts of natural gas generation being built, and roughly half of those plants will serve data centers exclusively, never connecting to the state grid at all. One approved site in West Texas is slated to generate close to 8 gigawatts by itself. That is enough electricity for more than half the homes in Texas, dedicated to a single data center. There is a version of this story where that is arguably good news, and it deserves saying out loud. Power built off the grid does not compete with your air conditioner in August, and it may keep consumer rates lower than they would otherwise be. But there is no version of it where that power comes for free. It means more plants, burning more fuel, releasing more of it into the air above somebody's house. The question is whose? Outside Abilene, in Taylor County, the answer to that question is being poured in concrete. The site is called Stargate, and when it is finished, it will be one of the largest artificial intelligence data centers in the world, roughly 4 million square feet of buildings spread across 1,100 acres. It is bigger than Central Park. This is flat, open country, Long sightlines, a horizon that runs uninterrupted in every direction, the kind of place where you can watch the sun come up and go down without anything in the way. Satellite images taken in 2024, next to images taken this year, show a transformation of the ground that is hard to look at casually, and construction still is not finished. From the road, you cannot really see it. Reporters who drove the perimeter found they could circle the property for a long time without ever getting a clear look at what was inside. That single fact, that one of the largest industrial projects in the country is effectively invisible from public ground, turns out to matter enormously. Because as of this summer, the Stargate campus has 62 diesel generators and 10 gas-fired turbines installed. And there are plans for 41 more turbines, more than 50 in total. When those are running, the site will be one of the largest fossil fuel power plants of any kind in the state of Texas. Not a utility, not a plant serving a city, a private power station built to run one building full of computers. The proposed on-site plant could deliver more than 1.7 gigawatts. That is enough energy to power over 1 million homes for a year. It would emit more than 7.8 million tons of greenhouse gases annually, roughly the yearly output of 2 million cars. Omaira Garcia goes by OG. Her property shares a fence line with all of it. She and her husband both served in the military, and it was his service that brought them to Abilene in the first place. They stayed a couple of years, and then something happened that happens to a lot of people who move to West Texas, expecting not to like it. They fell in love with the place. It took them a year of looking to find the right piece of land. Describing why they chose it, she said in an interview, "Just the views, the horizon, the sunrise, the sunset. It was just our own little piece of happiness." In 2025, ground broke on the other side of her fence. "All of a sudden, life changed," she said. "We had no idea what they were building there." And here is the part that should stop you. She could not find out, not because nobody knew, but because the people who knew had been asked to sign non-disclosure agreements, public officials among them. A project covering 1,100 acres went up next to her home, and the mechanism that kept her from learning what it was paperwork. What she got instead of information was dust. Constant construction dust, in the air, in the house, and everything. The neighbors started comparing notes, running an informal poll on how often each of them was changing their home air filters. The answer came back the same up and down the road, every 2 weeks. Completely full every time. That was the dust. The turbines had barely started. Investigative reporters had been trying to establish what these sites actually emit, and running into the same wall as everyone else. Public records requests help, and they used them. But records tell you what a company is permitted to do. They do not tell you what is happening at 4 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. So they brought a drone fitted with a thermal camera, and OG let them launch it from her property. In ordinary daylight footage, the site looks like nothing at all. An enormous gray building under a big sky, inert. It could be a warehouse, a distribution center, anything. Then the camera switches to thermal, and the image changes completely. Off one exhaust stack, heat is pouring out in a plume so bright it seems to overflow the frame. It is not smoke. There is nothing to see with the naked eye. But the thermal signature is unmistakable, and it is enormous. A careful caveat belongs here, and the reporters made it themselves. A thermal camera does not identify gases. It cannot tell you the concentration of any specific pollutant. What that heat signature establishes is simpler and harder to argue with. Combustion is happening. The equipment is running, and it is running hard. Now hold on to one number. On the day that footage was captured, exactly one of the 10 installed turbines was operating. 1 out of 10, in a plan that calls for more than 50. These turbines are, functionally, jet engines that make electricity. They burn natural gas, and they release nitrogen oxides, volatile organic compounds, and fine particulate matter, the family of pollutants tied to asthma, to cardiovascular damage, and to premature death. The 62 diesel generators sitting on the same property are worse per unit of power by an almost absurd margin. A typical diesel generator releases between 200 and 600 times more nitrogen oxides than a natural gas plant producing the same amount of electricity. None of that is visible from the road. That is the whole point. Until somebody puts a thermal camera above the tree line, this is a large, quiet building in a field. Which raises the obvious question, how is any of this allowed? Catherine Guerra spent years at the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, the state's environmental regulator. She now works for Public Citizen, a consumer rights group, which means she has seen this from both sides of the table. Her answer starts with a phrase most people have never heard: permit by rule. With permit by rules, they are activity-specific, she explained in an interview. So, for example, an auto body shop would get a permit by rule authorization, or a dry cleaner would get a permit by rule authorization. That is the category Stargate's initial authorizations came in under, and a permit by rule does something very specific. It grants the holder authority to begin operating with no public notice requirement and no public input or participation whatsoever. Asked what she made of that, she said, "That feels pretty intentional." Asked whether a process built for a laundromat makes sense for a plant that could power hundreds of thousands of homes, her answer was 4 words. "Not to me, it doesn't." Then came the second move. The year after securing those minor authorizations, the developers applied for a major air permit, the real kind, the kind that requires the best available emissions control technology and triggers extensive environmental review and public comment. They applied for it because they were moving to more than quadruple the number of turbines on the campus. Critics have a name for this sequence. Small first, big later. You get your foothold under a category nobody has to be told about. You break ground, you pour the concrete, and by the time the public is finally consulted, stopping the project is no longer a realistic option. It also raises a serious question under federal aggregation policy, which exists precisely to stop a large project from being evaluated in convenient pieces. And the permits that were granted without public input were not small. The first 10 turbines alone are authorized to release more than 1.6 million tons of greenhouse gases and more than 1,000 tons of air pollutants every year. Guerra's larger warning was about capacity. The data center industry is expanding at a rate that is beyond the capability of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality to sufficiently regulate, she said. We have seen enforcement cases this past year that were 10 years old. Texas is not the only place this is playing out, and Abilene is not the worst of it. In South Haven, Mississippi, just south of Memphis, a company called XAI installed gas turbines to power a facility called Colossus 2. The turbines arrived mounted on tractor trailers, and the company's position was that because they were temporary, they did not require state or federal permits. That position is badly out of step with long-standing federal policy. Turbines of that class are major sources of pollution, and major sources require permits, temporary or not. Crystal Polk's house is directly across the street from them. She grew up in that area. She is a severe asthmatic, and so are several of her children. She found out the same way OG did, which is to say she did not find out at all until it was too late to matter. "I did not discover that the power plant was going to be built until it was actually here," she said in an interview. "There wasn't a public meeting or anything like that. It was just kind of here all of a sudden, which was a big shock and a big surprise." She let the reporters fly from her yard too. The moment the drone cleared the tree line, at least a dozen turbines lit up on thermal, running, plainly and unmistakably, a few hundred feet from her front door. Her family had planned to grow old in that house. Instead, "We were going to retire here, but now we have emptied the house of all furniture because of the pollution." And then, about leaving the place she was raised, "I think I shed a few tears because it's been my forever. It's where I grew up." On April 14th, 2026, the NAACP, represented by the Southern Environmental Law Center and Earth Justice, sued XAI and a subsidiary over those turbines. 27 of them, capable of generating up to 495 megawatts, the output of a conventional power plant, installed and operated without an air permit, near homes and schools and churches. The suit followed a 60-day notice of intent served that February, the required first step for a citizen enforcement action under federal clean air law. What happened next is the detail that tells you where this fight actually sits. The United States Department of Justice intervened, on the side of the company. Its argument was that the case threatens national security interests, and it asked the court to throw the case out. The reporter who documented these sites, Evan Simon, was asked a version of the question you are probably asking now. Why are journalists doing this observation instead of regulators? Right now, what we're seeing at the administration is a lot of pro-artificial intelligence policies, coinciding with the gutting of various environmental agencies and enforcement agencies, he said. So it's really unsure if we weren't doing this kind of work, if anybody else would be. It would be convenient if all of this were theoretical. It is not, and the numbers exist. Pollution from backup generators at Northern Virginia data centers does not stay in Northern Virginia. It drifts into Maryland, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, and the District of Columbia. And the regional public health cost has been estimated at between $190 and $260 million a year. If those generators were to run at the maximum their permits allow, that estimate rises roughly tenfold, to somewhere between $1.9 and $2.6 billion annually. Researchers at the University of California, Riverside, and at Caltech projected the national picture. By 2030, they estimate data centers could contribute to roughly 600,000 asthma-related symptom cases, with public health costs exceeding $20 billion. Those costs land unevenly, and they land hardest on the people already closest to the equipment. As Guerra put it, these air pollutants, they don't go up into the atmosphere and go away. People with asthma or children and elderly people in these communities, those are the folks that are going to be suffering. There is a second effect that has nothing to do with what comes out of a stack. Concentrated industrial equipment running at full load generates enormous waste heat, and researchers have measured data centers creating their own local heat islands, raising nearby temperatures by as much as 2 degrees Celsius. Then there is water, because tens of thousands of high-powered chips generate heat that has to go somewhere, or the machines fail. Stargate uses a closed-loop cooling system, which circulates water to pull heat off the equipment. To the company's credit, that design generally only has to be filled once. It is not continuously drinking down an aquifer. It does, however, require more electricity to run. Statewide, the arithmetic is less comfortable. Texas data centers currently consume an estimated 25 billion gallons of water a year. Projections for 2030 run as high as 161 billion gallons, up to roughly 2.7% of everything the state uses. By some estimates, the sector alone could raise Texas water usage around 9% by the end of the decade. And where these facilities do connect to the public grid, the cost arrives somewhere very familiar. In the regional market covering the Midwest and Mid-Atlantic, data centers were responsible for 63% of the price increase in the most recent capacity auction. About $9.3 billion recovered from customers through higher rates. 67 million people in that region face an average bill increase of roughly 15% this year compared to the era before this build-out began. Projections put it at $70 a month by 2028. The market's own monitor documented $13 billion in added ratepayer costs in a single quarterly report. The most common reassurance offered about all of this is that the technology is getting more efficient. And that is true. Chips and models are meaningfully better per unit of power than they were 2 years ago. It will not save us, and we have known why since the 1860s. England at the time was worried about running out of coal. Some argued that as coal-burning engines became more efficient, the country would burn less of it. An economist named William Stanley Jevons showed the opposite was true. Cheaper, more efficient power does not reduce demand for power. It expands it. Efficiency made coal more useful, and so England burned more. That principle now has his name on it, and it describes this moment precisely. Every efficiency gain in artificial intelligence is being swallowed by growth in artificial intelligence usage. Growth that the efficiency gain itself helped create. So here is where it stands. Stargate may well be operating entirely within the permits it holds. The real question was never whether the company broke a rule. It is whether the rules were ever written for something like this, whether a process designed to review a dry cleaner should be the on-ramp for a private power station, and whether behind-the-meter energy grids are meaningfully regulated for safety and pollution at all. The industry's promise is that these machines will cure diseases and clean the air and help solve climate change. Evan Simon put the honest version plainly. The experts that I've been talking to say that that just isn't happening at scale right now. The primary use of these data centers is to power chatbots. None of this was inevitable. The gas turbines were a choice. The permit categories were a choice. The non-disclosure agreements and the missing public meetings were choices, made by people, and every one of them could be made differently tomorrow. There are 100 more of these sites planned in Texas alone, on top of the 100 already going up. Whatever gets decided about Abilene and South Haven is not the end of this story. It is the template for the next 200. OG is still out there, on the property it took a year to find, watching the sun come up over 1,100 acres of somebody else's power plant. Her words at the end of it, "We invest in our home, we serve our country, and we weren't even included in this process. We weren't given time to try to leave. So how do I feel? Upset." Thank you for watching all the way to the end. Documentaries like this one take real work to research and put together, and if you got something out of it, a like or comment genuinely helps more people find it. Subscribe if you want more of these. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.